Thanks for joining us for part 2 of our episode on cruise ship security. On this part of it, we're going to really talk more about the passenger side of it. We're going to talk a little bit in the specifics of the Cruise Vessel Safety and Security Act, which has been a fairly sizable change in the cruise industry of helping to improve security on board vessels and also into crime reporting and some other details, and we'll get into that. We're also going to talk a little bit about really the rights and responsibilities of passengers on board and the passenger ticket contract and some of the things you can expect from that side of it. We're also, we'll talk just briefly about the Cruise Line International Association and the Bill of Rights that they've put forward that all of the major cruise lines have signed, and we'll have links for all of these definitely down below in the comments section so that you can study and get further information. The other thing that we're going to do is the last part of this video, we're going to do a little bit of a question and answer session. We've had questions that have been asked to us over the past week and also months in our experience with working in this industry that we're just going to go through and answer some questions and kind of have some fun with that. So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the Cruise Vessel Safety and Security Act of 2010. We briefly mentioned this last week, but I thought it was important for us to kind of go into a little bit more detail and to discuss this act a little bit more. So there's some major parts here. Don't have the whole act memorized, so I definitely have to use my notes on this one, but there's some major parts of the act that we wanted to just talk about and kind of bring forward. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, but again, there's a link to the Cruise Vessel Safety and Security Act in the comments so that you can go and take a look at some additional information on this particular act. So number one, rail heights. Part of this act was to increase the height of rails on board cruise ships to 42 inches. Again, this is to try to help prevent people from going overboard. The other important detail to the Cruise Vessel Safety and Security Act was the addition of peepholes in all of crew member and passenger cabins. They have also looked into the man overboard detection systems. Now, there's a lot that's been done with man overboard detections, but in my opinion, and I think the opinion of a lot of folks in the cruise industry, is we're just not to where we need to be from a technology standpoint to really see effective systems. However, I think probably within the next few years, we're going to get really close. You have to have hailing devices for communication on board the ship. Also, video surveillance systems in documenting things that go on board the ship, really to help with ship security officers, with law enforcement organizations, and other agencies to help when it comes to trying to determine exactly what happened. And the video surveillance piece can be a substantial part of that. However, a lot of the video surveillance and the specifics of it have not been implemented. There's still some work that needs to be done on the Coast Guard side to be able to determine, hey, what are those standards for video surveillance? We also want to look at the passenger security guides that are on board, so passengers have an understanding of the security on board cruise ships and kind of the availability of security and the reporting side of it if something does happen. And then also get into when there is specifically a sexual assault on board a cruise ship, that there's antiretroviral medications that are available, and the doctors and nurses and medical staff on board the cruise ships have been trained in sexual assault, the administration of these drugs, and exactly what to do on the backside of it, unfortunately, if one of these incidents does take place on board. There's also now restricted and limited access to crew, to passenger stateroom. A big part of the Cruise Vessel Safety and Security Act was crime reporting, where the cruise lines now are required to report certain crimes that happen on board, specifically against U.S. citizens, or if they're operating in the U.S. waters, back through to the Department of Transportation, FBI, and we're going to have a link to that crime reporting piece so that you can see statistics are updated on a quarterly basis for crime reporting. And then again, the availability of that, not just the reporting side, but the public availability of that data so that from a public standpoint, you can see what's going on. And then there's been some training that's been put in place for crime scene preservation for crew members. So if there is an issue that does happen on board, that crew members from a security standpoint are trained in, how do we collect evidence? How do we preserve the crime scene? What do we need to do if there is something that takes place so that we can put gather information and then move that information and put it in the hands of law enforcement. So I just did a quick look on the website, again, on the crime statistics side of it, and you can go in and take a look at this as well. From the standpoint of crime stats for 2016, basically quarter by quarter. So in the reportable crime statistics, so here's the topics that cruise lines report back. Homicides on board, missing U.S. nationals, kidnapping, assault with serious injury, and theft greater than $10,000 in sexual assault. And so those are kind of the major categories. So from an incident standpoint, in the first quarter with the major cruise lines, there was 26 incidents reported across those topics. There were 32 in the second quarter, 23 in the third quarter, and then 11 in the fourth quarter of last year. So you can see from that standpoint, basically just under 100 incidents that were reported across all the major cruise lines with these incidents against U.S. citizens on board. So if you take a look at the number of passengers that are estimated to be moved, I think in 2016 it was close to 23 million people. It's still a low percentage, but again, anytime that something happens on board, it's definitely not a good situation because people are looking to go on board to take a vacation. But this kind of gives you a little bit of an overview when you take a look at this, and there's a ton of sources out there who go through and say that the number of crimes on board are increasing and that things are happening, but when you look at it, you have to take a look at it from a statistical standpoint. The number of cruise ships that are available and the number of itineraries are also increasing. The number of passengers that the cruise ships carry on a year in, year out basis are also increasing. So you have to take a look at those statistics from that standpoint, from the number of ships, the number of passengers that are moved in a particular year time frame to really get an idea. Are crime statistics really increasing, or is it increasing because we're seeing an increased number of passengers? So there's some research that you can do. Definitely provide you the links to be able to do that. The other part that I wanted to talk about was the ticket contract. We get asked questions on the ticket contract quite a bit. So there's a couple of pieces that I wanted to point out. When you step on board a cruise ship, you are under the authority of the captain of that particular cruise ship and under the authority of the flag of the vessel. What do I mean by flag? Where that vessel is registered. Are they registered in the United States? Are they registered in the Bahamas, in Panama, in some other countries? So you have to take a look at the laws and the regulations of the country of registration of the vessel. You also have to understand the laws and the regulations of the country that your cruise ship will visit. And laws and regulations differ across the board. So when you're in the United States, that cruise ship falls under the laws and the regulations of the United States, along with certain things on their flag state. When that cruise ship goes to visit the Bahamas, they fall under the laws and the regulations of the Bahamas. And the Bahamas have primary jurisdiction if something would happen while that vessel was in their territorial seas or at the pier in the Bahamas. The same as if you would visit Trinidad and Tobago. Your cruise ship would fall under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago when you're in their territorial seas or when you're alongside the pier in Trinidad and Tobago. So you really have to have an understanding of the laws and the regulations. The ticket contract is one of the most important documents that you can take a look at because it really lays out a lot of different things when it comes to the voyage and what can happen. So a couple of things that I want to highlight. And most ticket contracts across the cruise lines are very familiar or are very similar when it comes to that. So most cruise ships have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to any illegal activity or behavior on board the cruise ship, and you can be kicked off the cruise ship for that. At any time, the captain does have the right to be able to remove you from the cruise ship. And wherever they remove you, then it becomes your responsibility to get back to the United States. I have seen passengers removed from cruise ships for maybe behavior that's not illegal, but behavior that's causing a disturbance on board the ship to other passengers. So it does happen, and it actually happens probably a lot more than you think. When you come on board, you are bound by the terms and conditions of the ticket contract. One of the things that we get asked a lot is, when I come on board a cruise ship, what gives the cruise ship the right to search my bags? That's in the ticket contract. When you step on board, by your agreement to the ticket contract, gives that ship the ability to search your person, your bags, your stateroom at any time. So make sure when you go on a cruise, you have a good understanding of the ticket contract. Thank you for joining us on our past 2 episodes, concluding with today's episode on cruise ship security. As you can see, there's a number of laws, regulations, and guidelines that the cruise ships go by when it comes to shipboard security. So this is just a brief introduction to that. In these videos, we have links listed below that will connect you to some of the laws and regulations. You can always reach out to us at imsa.global if there's any questions you have or if there's something we can do to help you from a regulatory compliance standpoint. Be sure that you leave comments in the video below. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to this channel so you get notified of every single video we put out, not just our maritime video blogs that come out on Thursdays, but under our life and events section, we have different videos coming out about different things that we're involved with there. Also connect to us through our social media, Twitter, Facebook, and that's all listed in the comments section below. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to catching up with you next week when we will have another exciting topic on the maritime industry.